Hello and welcome. Today's video is all about Pat McGrath's new Divine Blush Duos. I have 4 shades of the blush duos, which I'm going to be demoing, swatching, and doing comparisons for. And I also have one of the shades of highlighter that's new. And one of the 4 shades of highlighter that has been released is a repeat shade that was released last year. So I'm going to be showing you that as well. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. I wanted to start out actually applying the highlighter. I bought the shade Lunar Allure. So that's what I'm going to put on first before I apply the blush. The blush I'm going to be applying today is Cosmic Coral, and I applied the 3 other blushes that I bought yesterday. I have demos of those that I'm going to insert later on in the video. But let's start out with Lunar Allure. It's described as a glimmering platinum. I did use this yesterday too. It's really beautiful. So I wanted to do this new kind of technique that I've been trying out with powder highlighters, which is applying them before blush, really buffing them into the skin, getting them really nice and smooth and blended before putting blush on top of them so that the highlighter doesn't look quite as stark. So I'm going to go right in with my Sonia G detail brush. It picks up a lot right from the beginning, so you have to be a little bit careful if you don't want to overdo the highlighter, and this is a very pigmented formula, but it's really beautiful. So let's put it on. I think this highlighter formula from Pat McGrath is very special. It's unlike any other highlighter I have. It's more of a traditional powder formula. It's not that hard kind of baked gelée type formula. And I have another shade of this actually that was released when her blushes originally released last year. I'm gonna link the video where I used that one below. I'll swatch it for you today, but I'm not gonna apply it to my face. It's a shade that's a little bit darker. It's called Golden Nectar. That's what that looks like. So compared to Lunar Allure, you can see it's a lot darker, but I can actually make this one work for my skin, and especially when I apply it in the same way that I just applied this one, where I really buff it into the skin before I apply blush. But this one, the Lunar Allure, is really well suited for fair skin tones because it's very light, but I don't find it too icy. So if you have a pale skin tone, I think it's gonna look really great on you. Definitely on more light medium and deeper skin tones, I think Lunar Allure would look quite icy. But if you have very fair skin, it's just a really nice bright shade that has a very wet look. So there's Lunar Allure compared to Golden Nectar. So I'm going to go ahead and apply Lunar Allure to my other cheek, and then we'll go in with the blush. So there's the highlighter on. I like the description of glimmering platinum, but I think it's a little bit less silvery than you might expect from the description of platinum. It does have a little bit of warmth and almost a very, very pale champagne kind of pinky rosé quality, just a gorgeous color. So now let's go into the blush. As I said, I'm going to be applying Cosmic Coral today. I'm going to go in with the Raise first, and then I'll go in with the pink shade. I'm using my Sonia G Lotus Cheek brush. Yesterday when I was applying the other shades, I used, I think, my mini cheek from Sonia G, and I find that this one actually applies the blush better. I prefer this. It's a little bit more densely packed, and for some reason that just seems to blend and buff the product in a little bit better than that slightly fluffier and smaller brush did. So going into the Raise, and I'm going to use this one as more of my all over cheek color. It's a little bit softer than that really bright pink. I haven't applied any bronzer today, so I'm relying on this to work as a little bit of an overall warming bronzing tone as well. With Cosmic Coral, the rays are described as a soft sienna demi-matte, so that's what's on right now. The roses portion is described as a cool pink coral demi-matte. When I compare this to the product shots online, the product looks a lot warmer in the pictures than it does in person, particularly this pink part. It looks a lot more like an orangey coral in the pictures, but in reality it is much more of a kind of cool coral. I guess that's a decent description, but I kind of just think of it as a mid-tone pink shade. And these blushes are quite pigmented, and I think especially I've seen some reviews of the deepest shade, which looks extremely pigmented. But I think if you go for some of the lighter shades and the mid-range shades, they're not quite as pigmented, although they are still fairly packed with pigment. But I find especially using this brush, for some reason, it really allows me to apply in like thin sheer layers and build up the product, which is my preference when I'm using blushes. I found again yesterday using the mini cheek brush, it wasn't quite the same. It was a little bit less buildable and kind of stronger right from the get-go yesterday with the other brush. So there's the terracotta shade, and now let's go into the pink shade. And I'm using that more as kind of an accent, more on the apples of the cheeks, just to kind of brighten things up a little bit. So there we have the two-toned gradient style application. Now I'm gonna go and mix the two shades together and just kind of top up right around the middle of the cheek here with that mixture. Here's the finished application of Cosmic Coral. Here's Cosmic Coral swatched, so rays, roses, and mixed. Now let's get into the applications from yesterday. I'm going to be starting out with Aphrodite Amour, and let me swatch it first before I show you the footage of me applying. Here's Aphrodite Amour swatch. That's the rays, that's the roses, and that's mixed right there. Aphrodite Amour is described when blended as a soft pink satin pearl. The rays shade, which I start out with in the demo, is described as a pink demi-matte, and the roses are a cool pink satin pearl. Next up is Venusian Sunrise. This was the one that I was most drawn to when I initially saw the photo of all the blushes. I was so into that purple blush. I think that's quite an unusual color, and paired with the pink, it looked so beautiful. Venusian Sunrise is described when blended as a cool pink demi-matte. The rays are a lavender demi-matte, and the roses are a pink demi-matte. Here's Venusian Sunrise swatched, rays, roses, and blended. And in this footage here, you can see me comparing Aphrodite Amour to Venusian Sunrise when they're on the cheeks. And you can see that Venusian Sunrise is much more of a cool pink. To me, it kind of reminds me of the Dior Pink Glow blush. I'll do a comparison of that. And you can see that Aphrodite Amour, in comparison especially, looks like a much warmer pink. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a peachy pink. I just feel that it's quite a warm mid-tone pink. In the application of these blushes here, I wasn't trying too hard to get them blended really nicely. My main purpose was really just to show the colors and how the shades would compare to one another on the cheeks. Personally, I much prefer the look of Aphrodite Amour on me in this footage, at least on that day. And I think in the future, when applying Venusian Sunrise, I want to focus a lot more on having that purpley tone as the main blush color, because I find that the pink kind of takes over it if you don't apply enough of the purple and you apply a little bit too much of the pink. And then last up, we have Paradise Glow. When blended, Paradise Glow is described as a bronzed sienna satin pearl. The rays are a golden bronze satin pearl, and the roses are a terracotta demi-matte. Here's Paradise Glow swatched, rays, roses, and blended. Paradise Glow might be my favorite. I expected to like all of these, but I wasn't expecting to like this one as much as I did. And again, the promo photos of this appear quite a lot kind of warmer and browner, almost more orangey than it is in real life. And I think these tones work very well for my skin tone. They don't go too brown or orangey at all on me. They're more of a sort of ruddy terracotta that seems to work very well for my skin tone. So now just to share my overall thoughts on these blushes, I'm super happy with these. I have 5 of the blushes from Pat's original release, which I will be comparing to these ones where relevant. And it's one of my favorite blush formulas. I think it's really easy to work with. It's very blendable, buildable, and just a pleasure to apply. And I feel that exactly the same and even more so with these duos, because I love to have the option of having the 2 tones in one palette, and you can really create your own kind of custom blush look that way. I love to layer blushes and apply, 2 or 3 blushes at a time. I often don't, just because I don't want to go into a bunch of different compacts and palettes and I'll just end up applying a single blush shade. But with the convenience of having the 2 shades within one little pan here, I'm much more likely to play around with the combinations of colors. You can certainly just go in with a brush and mix the 2 shades together. I think a lot of people will do that, but for me, the benefit of having the duos like this is that you can apply each shade separately. And I have to say, when I originally saw the photos of these blushes online, they really captivated me. Every so often, probably just a few times a year, a makeup release will come around that really captivates me, that I get really excited about. It just speaks to me in some special way. And this is one of those releases. And having tried the blushes now and seeing them in person, they have lived up to my expectations. So I'm very happy with this release. Let's get into some comparisons now with some of Pat's other blushes. So the 5 shades of the original release that I have are Fleurtatious, Nude Venus, Nymphette, Desert Orchid, and Divine Rose. Fleurtatious, I don't think compares to any of the new blush duos, so I'm just going to show you that and put it aside because there's really no relevant comparison to this shade. It's quite an interesting shade, very muted, quite pale, kind of mauve shade. Similarly, I don't think anything really compares to Divine Rose, which is actually not all that different from Fleurtatious, but it's just deeper and a little bit more richly pigmented. And actually you can see there almost a little bit more vibrant than Fleurtatious, although I still wouldn't describe Divine Rose as a vibrant shade, but I can see more of the pink and purple just kind of popping a little bit as compared to Fleurtatious there. The only one I think I would compare it to is maybe the purple from Venusian Sunrise, so let's throw that on there. And you can see how much more of a kind of blue-purple Venusian Sunrise is compared to Divine Rose and Fleurtatious. Actually, maybe I'll throw in the flower shade from Aphrodite Amour because it's a little bit more muted and cool toned as well. That one to me is more pink than any of these other ones. Desert Orchid and Nude Venus I wanted to compare specifically to the Raise shade in Paradise Glow. I've heard that this darker shade in Paradise Glow is actually the same as one of the shades from the original release, which I don't have. I think it's called Paradise Venus. This one I think is a completely new shade, but it does look somewhat similar to both Desert Orchid and Nude Venus, somewhere maybe in between those two. So let's swatch all of those. All right, so there's Desert Orchid, Nude Venus, and the Raise shade from Paradise Glow. And I think that the Paradise Glow one does look like a combination. Desert Orchid is a little bit more earthy and kind of nude, brown, and muted. Nude Venus has more pink in it when you compare them, and I can see kind of the combination of those 2 shades coming through in Paradise Glow. Let's throw in the Raise shade from Cosmic Coral as well in this comparison because it's a little bit more of a brown, earthy type shade. That actually doesn't look too dissimilar to the Raise shade from Paradise Glow. Maybe a little bit stronger, a little bit of a kind of more vibrant, brighter terracotta shade. And not too dissimilar from Desert Orchid either, but again, it's a little bit brighter. You can see a little bit more maybe pink or red coming through in the Cosmic Coral Raise shade. And then Nymphette is really the only pink type shade from the original release that I have. So I'm going to compare it to the flowers on Cosmic Coral, Aphrodite Amour, and Venusian Sunrise. So Nymphette And then the flowers from Cosmic Coral, Aphrodite Amour, and Venusian Sunrise. None of these look all that similar to Nymphette, but if I had to choose one that was the most similar, definitely the one from Aphrodite Amour. It has a similar muted quality, although I think the one from Aphrodite Amour looks a little bit cooler toned, a little bit actually kind of more muted and gray cool than Nymphette, which has a little bit more brightness to it. These two here, the Cosmic Coral and the Venusian Sunrise, actually look not all that dissimilar from one another, but are definitely a lot brighter and just kind of deeper colors than the other two that we have here. Just to show you really blended swatches of the 4 shades that I got, I mixed both colors together in each of these swatches: Cosmic Coral, Aphrodite Amour, Venusian Sunrise, and Paradise Glow. So there you can see kind of the overall effect that each of these blush duos would give to your cheeks. I'm thrilled with these blushes. The formula is excellent. Again, I preferred this kind of slightly denser natural fiber brush to apply these. It just seemed to work really well. And they are pigmented, but they're buildable too. So I just try to start with quite a small amount and just build up the color gradually, because it can get away from you if you pick up a lot of product right from the beginning. The colors are beautiful. I think the way the tones are paired in each palette is lovely. I like how in each palette there's one shade that's a little bit more subdued, which for me is great as someone with pale skin. I can use that as my main color, but then I can really punch it up and brighten things up with a more vibrant or darker color in each palette. Right now, I have to say my personal favorite is Paradise Glow, which is a little bit of a surprise, but it just works perfectly with my skin tone. It's not too warm or too orangey or too brown. It's the perfect kind of neutral terracotta tone that gives me a real kind of sun-kissed look. I think that Cosmic Coral also gives me a sun-kissed look, especially when I mix the two colors together, but it's more of a real sunburn look. Like these colors mixed together on my cheeks are actually what I look like when I have a sunburn. So I prefer the slightly more muted, like earthy version of a sun-kissed look for me that I get from Paradise Glow. Venusian Sunrise is just stunning. I prefer the purple tone in it. To me, that's the unique part of this palette. And as I said, in the future when I use this, I want to work on using more of the purple as my main color and just a very slight accent with the pink, which can be somewhat overpowering in my opinion. And then Aphrodite Amour, this I would say is probably the least unique in terms of the two colors that you're getting in this palette, but I think these colors work really well on the skin. I love how muted the roses part is, which really tones down the brightness of the rays part of the palette. And although not especially unique, I think these blushes are very flattering and a great kind of everyday color of blush for someone who wants more of a neutral to warm pink tone blush. The highlighters I've already talked about, but just to sum it up, the formula is beautiful. It gives an incredibly wet, glossy look to the skin, and that's something that I don't find you get all that often from powder highlighters. I find the best way definitely to apply these is to really buff them into the skin, and if you can, apply them before blush. I think that works really nicely, because if these aren't blended in a way that they're allowed to really sink into the skin very well, they can look quite harsh and, you know, icy and almost chalky on the skin. But when they're blended, they're really incredible. The Lunar Allure shade is going to be perfect for people with fair skin, which is great to see from Pat McGrath, finally a highlighter that really is made and suited for people with fair skin. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I always love to see those. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.